Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto was the bodyguard of Azula. Naruto is banished from Konoha, but gives them the slip and boards a ship. Soon after, he is shipwrecked on Ember Island and is saved by Azula. 3 years later, Naruto is Azula's bodyguard while she hunts for the Avatar, but did he see the last of Konoha? Before we start, kindly like and subscribe to this channel, and look over the description box for the author of this amazing storyline. Welcome aboard. Chapter 55, Getting There and Setting Up. Location, Konoha and Kiri teams. They walked quietly and quickly through the forest. How far away are we, Jiraiya? Azula asked. It had been 2 days since they met up with the team from Kiri, and they were making good time. But the fact that they had no idea when the underground auction would occur kept making them want to go faster. We should be just on the outskirts of the city, he answered as he looked at the map. If I'm reading this thing right, we should be coming up on the edge of the forest. You know, if you wanted someone to really make sure of where we are, you could have given the map to Sokka, Naruto pointed out. The tribesman was the designated map guy after all. I can read a map, Naruto, he retorted as he put the map away. Hey, I'm just saying. I think I can see the edge of the forest, June said from the front, riding atop Nyla. As everyone followed to where her finger was pointing at, they could see a break in the trees. They quickly made their way over to the break to see if it was the clearing. They got their answer when they saw the city of Masu down below them. It looked like the ideal coast city. They could see the beach stretching down the edge of the city while the buildings were big and tall. The ocean was a beautiful turquoise blue and birds flew overhead. Suigetsu whistled with appreciation as he took it all in. Now that's a pretty sight, he declared. Is anyone else besides me up for hitting the beach? We are here on business, you dumbass, Karen yelled at him. Not for pleasure. Karen, I don't think he cares, Yugo told his teammate. The look on Suigetsu's face said it all. If he could, he probably would have made love to that beach. The mental image of that particular idea was not something that worth saying out loud. It made even Yugo shudder. Can you blame him, Yugo? Sokka asked as he stared at the ocean. Just look at all that water. It's practically calling me to it. He had a very strong urge to swim in it, but that might just be his heritage working on him. One couldn't be a part of the water tribes if they didn't know how to swim. We can possibly do something about that, Anko said as she too stared at the ocean. I mean, not everyone needs to go and meet Jiraiya's informant. We still need some of us to go with him, to make sure we get all the information. Reimu said. Even though he didn't say it, they all knew he meant someone from the Kiri team. Look, let's get into the city and find a hotel to stay put in, Azula said. Then we can worry about who is doing what with who. No one could find anything wrong with that idea. They quickly made their way down the hill they were standing on and walked into the city. It was even more beautiful up close than from a distance. The marketplaces were full of people, and the streets seemed to be full. The air smelled incredibly clean and faintly of the sea. It's almost hard to imagine this place would host something like the underground auction, Suki commented as they walked through the streets. It was quite a spacious street, with a lot of room for people to walk. You'd be surprised, actually, June told her. A few of the people had given her an odd look, mostly because of Nyla. But what I would like to know is why the shinobi haven't taken care of the organized crime here. She gave Jiraiya a pointed look. That's mostly because if we did get rid of organized crime, we'd lose a majority of the missions given to us, he answered her question. Organized crime in the elemental countries is currently the reason why shinobi are still around. They're a necessary evil. That's a poor excuse, Azula argued. It might be, but we will use that excuse in order to keep our village alive, and our stomach full. The same goes for Kiri. Chojuro told her with a firm tone. We'll take any mission that keeps us paid and not starving. Both June and Azula could tell that neither of them was going to back down from what they said. They had spent enough time with Jiraiya and Naruto to know that shinobi meant what they said. I wonder what I could get from the marketplace. Sokka mused as he walked through the crowds. Akela stayed by his side and most people assumed he was just a large dog. Both wolf and human were eyeing the fishes being passed around in the market. They were trying desperately not to drool when they saw the bigger fishes being sold and carried away. Food later, Sokka, mission first. Suki reminded him. She knew if you tried to deny Sokka food, he would only keep coming back to it. That one day at Ember Island made her learn that lesson well enough. I know. I just can't help it. He practically groaned. It just looks so tasty. Akela barked in agreement. The meat around here was just begging to be eaten. Food later, Sokka. She repeated. All right, he said, forcing himself to look away. Akela followed suit with a small whine. Is he always like that? Yugo asked Naruto in a whisper. If we blindfolded Sokka and waved a piece of cooked meat underneath his nose, he would be able to tell us what kind of meat it is, how it was cooked, how long it was over the fire, how fresh it was, if spices were used and if so, what kind and how, and the best way to eat it. He answered with a straight face. You're kidding. No, I am not. If there was a deity of meat, Sokka would be his first disciple. He could still remember that one night in Ba Sing Se. The guys decided to have an eating contest, just for the hell of it. By the time they had gotten to the second serving, Zuko, Naruto, and Jiraiya could only watch in stunned fascination as Sokka ate everything that was put in front of him. He would eat the vegetables, but his main focus was on the meat. They were fairly certain that if he could, he would have taken the plate and shoved everything down his throat. They were thanking both Kami and Agni that Sokka knew table manners. June reprimanded her Shirshu, who started sniffing with interest at the market. You can eat later. Nyla gave a small hiss of frustration, but that was all. He knew very well that when she said no, she meant it. He learned that lesson the hard way. There's a place we can stay at. Jiraiya pointed over to one of the larger buildings that was just down the street and looked to be just by the beach. It's a hotel, so we won't look suspicious. Looks expensive. Chojuro noted. The others could see where he was coming from. The front of the hotel had doors that were complete glass and was about twice their size. The carpet that led to the doors was of high quality and wasn't cheap. Not gonna be a problem, he declared before walking down the street and towards the hotel, the others close behind him. June stopped briefly outside to get off of Nyla and ordered him to stay. He walked through the doors with no hesitation and went straight to the reception counter. Hello sir, welcome to the Coastal Hotel. How may I help you? The receptionist asked with a bright smile, which briefly reminded those who had been in Ba Sing Se while Long Foam was in power of Ju-Di. The only difference was that the receptionist's smile was a lot less creepy. Yes, I would like 3 of your penthouse suites, Jiraiya told her. The smile fell from her face and was replaced with an uncertain look. No one had ever ordered 3 penthouse suites before because anyone who came in for a room before couldn't afford it. 3 penthouse suites? Repeated Karen under her breath. I thought we were going to stay inconspicuous. We're just a couple of people getting rooms. Yugo replied quietly. What's wrong with that? It's 3 penthouse suites. She hissed at him. Would the 2 of you keep it down? Suigetsu told them. You're going to scare the nearby kids. Both Yugo and Karen glanced over to the side and saw that there were a couple of little kids standing off to the side who were watching them with nervous fascination. I think they're just scared because they saw your face, Karen retorted. The three of you knock it off before I whack you all upside the head. Naruto ordered, not bothering to turn around to look at them. They heeded his order, mostly because they knew he could and would do it. "THR3 penthouse suites, sir?" repeated the receptionist. "Are you sure that is what you want?" "Yes, it is," Jiraiya answered. Ever since he had walked into the hotel, his stance had changed from that of an easygoing and carefree person, which described him quite well on most days, to that of a man who radiated confidence, power, and demanded respect without saying a word. "How long will you be staying, sir?" she asked, trying to remain professional. She was new to this job and she instantly knew that this was the kind of man who would get her fired if she got anything wrong. "Indefinite, for now," he answered shortly. "Do you have a means of identification on your body, sir?" His gaze hardened as he looked straight at her. "What do you mean by that?" She gulped. "It's standard policy for the hotel, sir. Once a customer reaches or goes past a certain amount, we are required to ask for identification," she hastily explained. "I see." He reached into his vest and pulled out an ID. It was a fake, but only he and the squad of shinobi behind him knew that. He handed it to her, and she hesitantly reached out for it. "Hurry up, girl. Neither I or my company have time to waste." He all but barked out. "Yes, sir." She squeaked as she quickly examined the ID, noting to details of it. "Everything seems to be in order, sir." She handed back the ID, which he took from her hand and placed it back in his vest with no wasted movements. "Here are the keys to the suites. The full amount you will have to pay will be given to you when you leave." She hands him the keys, which he took and threw two of them behind him without looking. As the keys sailed through the air, both Anko and Chojuro caught them with ease. "Please enjoy your stay at the Coastal Hotel," she finished with a shaky smile. He turned around and started walking away, not saying a word to her. The rest of the group fell in behind him. "Lord Jiraiya, was it really necessary to get suites that are at the top of the hotel?" Anko asked as she walked behind him. "Taking all those stairs are going to make us exhausted by the time we get to the top." "Actually, Anko, the Coastal Hotel has installed a new invention, something called an elevator," he replied, gesturing over to several openings in a nearby wall that led to a small room with one person standing next to a large lever. "It supposedly shortens the time it takes to get up to the higher floors." "Really?" asked Sokka, who started examining the elevator with interest. "Do you know how it works?" "Not really. But you'll probably find out once the thing gets started." He walked over to the elevator and entered it. Everyone else piled in, making it a little cramped. They had to be careful not to step on Akela, and the operator closed the door. "The 30th floor, please," Jiraiya told the operator. The operator nodded and pulled the lever. Everyone in the elevator felt a quick shudder all around them, and then the elevator began to go up, the sight of the lobby quickly disappearing from their sights. The only noises that were heard while they were in the elevator were the sound of it going up the chute it was in. Finally, it stopped and the sounds faded away. "Your floor, sir," the operator announced. "Thank you," Jiraiya told him before walking out of the elevator into a small hallway with a door at the end with the rest of the group behind him. As the elevator went back down, he took the key he had been given and unlocked the door. "Here's the first suite," he announced as he walked in. As the others followed him, they looked around. "Nice place." Suigetsu whistled as he looked around. The suite was quite spacious. There was ample walking distance between the living room and the small kitchen. There were enough bedrooms for at least 4 people, 8 if people planned to share the same bed, which Naruto, Azula, Sokka, and Suki planned to do. The bathroom held a shower stall that you could tell was luxurious just by looking at it. The large windows that were by the living room also let out a balcony long for a couple of people to sit down on the chairs comfortably. Okay, here's how we're going to split up the suites, Jiraiya declared, getting everyone's attention after they had taken off their packs and put them down. Anko and her team will take the top suite, the Kiri team will take the middle suite, and my team will stay here in the bottom suite. Oh great, we'll be using the elevators a lot then, won't we? Suigetsu grumbled. In his mind, it was going to be a pain using the contraption just to see what the others were planning and making sure his team know what was going. Judging from some of the looks the others were wearing, they were thinking the same thing. No, we'll only use the elevators to get to our own personal suites. Then how will we talk to the other teams, O wise and powerful Toad Sage? He asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Knock it off, Suigetsu, before I kick your head off again. Naruto threatened him. Suigetsu clamped his mouth shut, already nervous about the blonde. The rest of Team Paragon, including Jiraiya, all looked at Naruto. Whether he had realized it or not, he had defended Jiraiya, one of the many he had said that he didn't want to be near. They weren't if he had done it on purpose or not, but they hoped that it was a small step towards becoming cordial with the Konoha shinobi again. Thank you, Naruto, Jiraiya said to him. As I was about to say, the balconies on the outside of the suites are close enough for a shinobi to leap up the side to get to the next balcony. That's how you will talk to the others. We'll high up enough that people on the ground won't notice us. And what about those who aren't shinobi in the group? Asked Sokka. I'm pretty sure that we won't be able to just leap up the side as you've put. Azula could probably do it by using her fire bending to fly, but the rest of us would be stuck. Not to worry, Sokka. I thought of that and packed this just in case. He pulled out a scroll and held it up in the air for everyone to see. I've sealed a couple of ladders in this thing. I figured we'd have this kind of situation sooner or later. Only you would seal ladders in a scroll, Naruto said with a roll of his eyes. However, he also had a small smile on his lips. He threw a mock glare at the blonde. Hey, you never know when the most random of shit will save your life. Have I ever told you the story of how I managed to get myself, Tsunade, and Orochimaru out of a bad situation during the Second Shinobi World War using nothing but a rubber ducky? The looks on everyone's faces were a mixture of disbelief and WTF as they all stared at him. No, you have not, Suki finally said. She was almost pushed to ask what the hell had happened that made him use a rubber ducky to get out of a bad situation, but she wanted to focus on the mission they were given. I thought I did. He shrugged his shoulders. Oh well, remind me to do that one of these days. We could probably use the humor. If we want humor, FS-sensei, we'd throw you into the women's side of the hot springs and let them beat you into a bloody pulp. Sokka told him in a completely deadpan tone. You could do that, and I could beat you to the ground and make you beg for mercy. He replied. Both Naruto and Sokka shuddered at his words. They had tossed him into the women's side once, they had caught him by surprise. The next day, he had practically left them for dead on the training ground and claimed it was sparring practice. The last thing the two of them saw before falling unconscious was the smug grin June wore. Okay, moving on then, Naruto said, not really wanting to continue that conversation. What are we going to do, now that we're here? I know what I'm doing, June said as she walked back to the door. I'm going to take care of Nyla before he makes a scene. I think we can all agree that a Shersha causing chaos in the middle of a city is not a good thing. Try not to take too long, June, Jiraiya warned her. Relax, I've done this before. It should only take a half hour. I'll meet up with the group who isn't meeting the informant at the marketplace. She walked out of the suite, closing the door behind her. They faintly heard the sound of the elevator arriving, and then leaving through the door. So, how are we going to do this? Azula asked Jiraiya. Everyone else more or less gathered around him so they could hear what he had to say. I'll need to make contact with my informant to see if he has any information on the underground auction, he told them. I'll need a member from the two other teams to come with me so they can properly inform their teams when we're done, so Anko and Chojuro are with me. Ah, but I wanted to go look at that beach. Anko whined, pouting for she was worth. Do I have to go? Anko-sensei, you're not a child so please don't act like one. Karen groaned into the palm of her hand. There were times her sensei could just embarrass her to no end, like she went on a dango eating spree, which was never funny for her or Yugo, as they had to make sure she didn't go overboard if Irika wasn't with her. It is fine, I'll take Yugo instead, Jiraiya assured the redhead. Just make sure Anko acts like an adult in public. I'm not that bad, Lord Jiraiya. Anko protested. Then what was that just now? He asked her. Moving on, I'll also take Chojuro with me as well. Why him? Asked Reimu. Because right now, he's the only on your team that's not liable to get punched. He answered with complete seriousness. Anybody got anyone questions? No. Good, I didn't want to hear them. Yugo, Chojuro, with me. He ordered as he walked towards the door. Both Yugo and Chojuro fell in behind him. What about the rest of us? Suki asked. Get the lay of the land, and if you want to take a look at the beach while you're at it, be my guest. We'll be back as soon as we can. They left the suite, leaving the rest of the group in the place alone. Okay, I'm assuming nobody really planned to hit the beach when we got this mission, right? Sokka asked, looking at the others. They all shook their heads. I thought not. So that rules out the beach party idea. We're not here to party. Reimu curtly reminded him. Ever since the Kiri team had joined up with them, his attitude hadn't gotten any better. He kept looking at Suigetsu like he was the most disgusting thing he had ever seen, and was still a little hostile to the Konoha teams. If he didn't rein it in, they would end fighting one another. That was the last thing they needed if they were going to cooperate. I realized that, Reimu. He replied. But we need a good excuse as to why we're going to the beach. We could say that we were drawn to it, and we couldn't help but go towards it. Suigetsu suggested. They could all tell that he really wanted to that beach. Oh come on, there is no way anyone would pay that. Karen told him, annoyance clear in her voice. She's right. Azula agreed. No one will believe that to be a good excuse. Ty Lee could have come up with a better one. Those who knew Ty Lee also knew that she was probably the least likely to lie, period. She might deceive and she might omit, but she wouldn't lie. It's good enough. Sokka declared. If people ask us any further questions, we'll improvise. Not going to say anything, Kit? The QB asked his host with a small smirk. Nope, not a single word, Naruto replied. He knew if he did say something, either mentally or publicly, something was going to happen to them. This was just one of those situations where it did. A good example was what happened in the capital of the Land of Fire. It would be a simple answer to a lot of possible questions we might get. Suki admitted. Thank you, Suki. That was what I was going for here. Sokka praised her, making her smile. So then, we'll take a look around and hopefully meet up with June in the process. Let's get to it. Suigetsu shouted before charging out of the room, all but tearing the door off its hinges and slamming it close behind him. The others just stared at the door. Man, he really wants to go to that beach. Naruto commented, making the others laugh a little. Reimu, however, just stifled a growl. We're not just going to stay here talking, are we? Anko demanded. Karen groaned. No sensei, we're not. That was all Anko needed to hear before charging after Suigetsu, leaving the room within seconds. Karen didn't say anything, she just went after her sensei. We might as well follow them. Azula said with a roll of her eyes. Let's go, people. Actually, Reimu and I need a moment alone. Naruto said, surprising the Kiri shinobi. You all go after those three. We'll catch up with you. The rest of his team gave him all a brief look before shrugging their shoulders. If Naruto wanted to talk to Reimu alone, they knew he had a good reason for it. Alright, we'll see you outside. Sokka told before he and the others left the suite. Azula was the last one out. Before she closed the door, she gave Naruto one last look, asking a silent question. He shook his head and motioned for her to go. She nodded once and closed the door. Alright, what do you want to talk about? Reimu asked. While he didn't show it, he was weary of the blonde. He had heard of his exploits before he ran away, and he had heard of his duel with Orochimaru. When Kiri heard of the new fire daimyo bestowing the title of Shinobi Kikken on him, all Reimu could think of was how appropriate. I just want to ask you a question, that's all. Naruto told him. And what would that question be? Why exactly do you hate Suigetsu? What? He all but growled. He unconsciously brought his hand closer to his holster, as if he was prepared to fight. Why exactly do you hate Suigetsu? The fire paragon repeated the question, remaining calm. Now wasn't the time to be sarcastic. He just wanted an honest answer. Why should you care if I hate Hozuki? We are working together. The blonde pointed out. I just want to why you hate him. He's a Kami-forsaken traitor, that's why. He snapped. He left the village just so he could things on his own. I thought he was kidnapped by Orochimaru and was experimented on. Naruto replied, remembering the near-fight that happened around the campfire. Ever since that day, Suigetsu and Reimu had made an effort to keep away from each other. The fact that Chojuro would glare and place a hand on his sword when it looked like they were going to fight helped. That's what he says, and I'm not inclined to believe him. Reimu said with a snort of derision. So, you hate him because he left the village? No, I don't hate him because he left the village. I hate him because he left the village, and when he was brought back, he was given the choice to serve when he should have been executed on the spot. Now that would be a waste of a good shinobi. Even he knew that executing a good shinobi without the offer to come back to the village was just plain stupid. That's what they kept telling me. You'll have to pardon me if I have a hard time believing it. The Kiri shinobi growled at him. He didn't like where the conversation was going. Are we done here? He asked. No, we're not. Naruto told him firmly. Then what the hell do you want to know? He demanded. His temper was about to be lost, and if that happened, there was no promise of him holding back from attacking the blonde. He wouldn't care if he couldn't beat him to a pulp. If he got some damage, he'd be happy. Suigetsu isn't the only one you hate, I know that much. Yeah, you're right. I hate all traitors who abandon their village, which means I also hate you. The Kiri shinobi declared, staring Naruto straight in the eye. He could only smirk in response. No, you don't. If you did, you would have said something to my face earlier. I think you only hate traitors from Kiri, namely Suigetsu and Kisame Hashigaki. The mere mention of his uncle's name made him grow angry. His hands shook at his sides as he tried to hold his calm. If he stayed in the same room with Naruto, it would be a losing battle. We're done here. Let's join the rest of the group. He all but stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. And what exactly was that all about? The Kyuubi asked Naruto. The last time I checked, you were not a therapist. I just wanted to be sure of who he hated, Fox. That's all. He answered shortly as he began walking towards the door. Now that's a lie and we both know it. You wanted to know why he hates his uncle, and see if you could get rid of that hatred. Are you trying to make up for your supposed failure with the Uchiha? Shut up, it's not that. He said as he opened the door and left the suite. He would never admit it, but Kyuubi knew that was what he was doing. He just decided not to push it. It was better to focus on things involved in the mission, like how Reimu's behavior could possibly affect the mission. What Naruto had in Konoha could be dealt with when he was in the village. Location, Jiraiya's group. Here we are. Jiraiya declared as they stopped in front of a store that faced the ocean. Yugo stared at the sign hanging from the front. It's a fish store, he said in amazement. It was indeed a fish store, they could tell by the smell coming from inside, and the word fish was a part of the sign. Of course, it's a fish store, we're in Masu. What were you expecting, a brothel? You are sort of infamous for that kind of thing, Lord Jiraiya. Chojuro pointed. He groaned, shaking his head and scratching his hair. You peek in a couple of bathhouses, and they never let you hear the end of it. He muttered to himself. If I'm not correct, I believe it was more than a couple, Lord Jiraiya, and not just bathhouses. Yugo told him. Oh whatever, I'm not having this conversation with a pair of kids. Let's go. He walked into the store, leaving the two of them outside. They felt mildly insulted by being called kids, but then realized that to anyone who wasn't the same age as Jiraiya, and had gone through the same things as he did, they practically were kids. Then they realized that he had left them outside and quickly headed in. Jiraiya walked up right to the counter, and got the attention of the person standing behind it. Can I help you, sir? The worker, who looked to be his early teens and a little nervous, most likely because he wasn't used to working in front of people, if Jiraiya had to guess, asked him. Yeah, you can. He answered. Get Ryoshi, tell him an old friend wants to see him about a common foe. Tell him those exact words. Yes, sir. The kid quickly scuttled away, disappearing through a door in the back. Is your contact a retired shinobi? Chojuro asked Jiraiya as they waited for said contact. Nope, he's a retired fisherman. He replied, not even turning to look back at the Kiri shinobi. Then, what was all that about a common foe? He didn't know how a shinobi and a retired fisherman could have a common foe. It would have sounded absurd if Jiraiya had sounded completely serious. We have a common foe because we once spent 3 months fishing for the same fish, which kept disappearing on us whenever we were close to getting him. The Toad Sage explained. To this day, we're not quite sure who the one who finally caught him was. Speak for yourself, Jiraiya. A voice spoke as a man Jiraiya's age walked out of the door in the back. I still say that I was the one who caught him. You and I both know that our lines got tangled that day, so we don't know who got him. Jiraiya told the man, who simply shrugged his shoulders. You've got your story and I've got mine. He replied. They stared at each other for a minute before laughing. It's good to see you, Jiraiya. It's good to see you, Ryoshi. So, are you here to relax? I still got my boat lying around. The grin on his face was almost boyish. Sorry, here on official business. He gestured to Yugo and Chojuro to emphasize his point. The grin disappeared and was replaced with a look of disappointment. Of course you are. One of these days, you're going to have to come on for a vacation. You can't keep coming here on business. You know I have a lot of work, especially nowadays. Jiraiya told his contact. He sounded like they've had this conversation before, and it always ended the same way. You say that every time. He replied with an almost accusatory tone. Are you ever going to come here for pleasure, just once? Ryoshi, I know how you feel about me, but my heart will always belong to the ladies. The Toad Sage said with such a solemn expression, he had to be mocking the retired fisherman. And I was married, you asshole. It looked like there was going to be a fight between the two of them before they smiled again. Both Yugo and Chojuro realized that these two were old friends from way back, and they were practically strangers in comparison. Alright, now that we've gotten that out of the way, what do you need to know? Ryoshi asked. I had that the underground auction was in town. Jiraiya answered, his mood becoming serious. He knew what that meant. Kid, I'm taking a break. You or one of the other guys needs to take the front. He shouted to the back. He walked around the counter without waiting for a response and walked out the front door. Jiraiya and the other two were right behind him. They walked through the streets, moving through the crowds at a leisurely pace. While the shinobi needed to know what the information was, they knew if they were impatient, they would get noticed, and that was not needed at the current time. Soon, they arrived at a small cafe, and sat down at a table. I didn't think you were the kind of guy who came to this kind of place, Ryoshi. Jiraiya commented. I'm not. The owner of this place lets me take a break here once in a while free of charge. He answered. I usually don't order anything, I just stretch my legs. How'd you get something like that? Yugo asked. He used to work for me. He answered with a shrug of his shoulders. A waitress came out to take their order, but he waved her away. She got the hint and turned back around. Most of Masu has either worked with or for you. Jiraiya pointed out. That's why I work for you on the side. He replied. So, what do you know about the underground auction? Only the bare minimum, you got lucky, Jiraiya. The thing starts in a week. The relief on the faces of the three shinobi was obvious to anyone who looked in their direction when they had heard that. Do you know where it's being held? Chojuro asked urgently. He shook his head. Sorry, kid. I don't know that. Anybody who's involved in the underground auction is being very tight-lipped about it. The fact that I could find out about when it's going to happen is a surprise just by itself. Have any of the crime families come into town? Jiraiya asked. Many of the families would just come to make sure that the things that they were auctioning off were actually bought. But still, if they could capture one of the family members, preferably high enough to know where the underground auction will be, but low enough that no one will miss if they have to dispose of him, they could find the location of the underground auction and get there beforehand. Nope, we would have known if they have. They're always telling us to get out of the way unless we have a death wish. Honestly, it feels like a Kami-forsaken parade sometimes. He grumbled. You mean the underground auction has been held here before? Yugo asked. He had thought that this would have been the first time that Masu had held the underground auction. If they had held it more than once, then the families might use the same place as before. Of course, they haven't. Ryoshi told him. Nearby is one of their yearly meeting spots. So naturally, they stop in Masu either before or after the meeting. Kami help us if they decide to do both. Is it bad? Chojuro asked. He wasn't quite sure if he wanted to know the answer, but he still had to ask. They don't kill or rape anyone if that's what you're asking, that's a surefire way of getting the entire place pissed at them. The worst they do is trash someone's place and not bother cleaning up after themselves, or even pay for the damages. It just gets annoying after a while. I'm sorry, Ryoshi. Jiraiya apologized. He didn't like to see one of his old friends have trouble, and he would help if he could, but most of the time the retired fisherman would tell him to mind his own damn business, and leave him alone. What the hell are you apologizing for, you old pervert? It's not like you were the one who were wrecking places here. The retired fisherman admonished him. I've told you countless times, I am not a pervert. I'm a super pervert. He declared loudly for everyone to see, standing up from his seat. Everyone who heard him looked briefly at him before turning away. The women looked at him a bit longer with disgust before turning away and quickening their pace. And he wonders why we're surprised when he doesn't take us to a brothel or a hot spring to meet one of his contacts. Chojuro muttered to himself. himself. If that was the way he acted, it was no wonder he had that reputation. He would have been surprised if he actually had gotten any. Naruto and Sokka would have plenty of stories to regale him with about his exploits though. I heard that, Chojuro. And you'd be surprised at what the ladies think of me. The Toad Sage said as he sat back down. I find that hard to believe. He told him with a straight face. Ryoshi could only chuckle at the exchange between them. That brings back memories, he remarked, remembering the time they had spent trying to catch that fish. Are you still trying to see if that urban legend is true, Jiraiya? Nah, not the way I used to. I'm not as young as I used to be. He told him with a shake of his head. Nowadays, it's just a passing hobby. I would have thought you'd be chasing that rumor until your dying days. He could still remember the days where Jiraiya was camped out at that place, desperately trying to see if it was turned. It would have been funny and pathetic if he hadn't been curious too. Well, I'm older now, the old shinobi said with a shrug of his shoulders. I have more sense now to not let it be all-consuming. Apparently, you don't have enough sense to let it go completely. Would you? Fair point, he conceded with a smirk. Could we please remain focused here? Yugo asked. The kid's right, Jiraiya admitted. Do you know of anyone who might know the location of the underground auction, Ryoshi? The retired fisherman thought it over. Well, there might one person who could know. Do you remember a guy named Nezumi? Small guy who had a high-pitched voice and an attitude that made you want to punch him. He had memories of that guy, and they weren't all pleasant. Yep, that's him. He's always been going on about how he's practically a member of one of the families. No one bothers to ask which one. If what he says is true, then he might know where it's being held. Has he been acting strange in the past couple of days or weeks? Chojuro asked. He had learned a bit about behaviors before he had become a swordsman and always wondered if he would be able to put it to good use. Now that I think about it, he's been more quiet than usual in the past couple of days. He's still pompous, but he hasn't really spoken. It's kinda odd. I think we've got our person. If I remember correctly, Nezumi was always the squealer. If we put enough pressure on him, we'll find out where the underground auction is. Does he still go to that same club? He asked Ryoshi. Yeah, he still does. I guess you know what that means. He winced slightly. Yeah, I do. Cammy, I'm going to have to come up with a good one to get through there. I'd thought they would have torn that place down, considering its bad reputation. You could use that reputation to your advantage. Ryoshi pointed out, though he looked like the idea was a bad one. Have you been drinking? He accused him. It was just a suggestion, Jiraiya. That's all. Pardon me, but could the two of you tell us what you're talking about? Yugo asked. He didn't like the implications the two were talking about, and he wanted to make sure he wasn't mishearing or misinterpreting what he had heard. Judging by the look on Chojuro's face, he wanted to know the same thing. I'll tell you when we're back with the others. Jiraiya told him, not even looking at him. That was enough to send warning bells off in the two shinobis' minds. If that's all you need, I gotta get back to the store, Ryoshi stated as he stood up. Odds are one of the workers did something wrong and I have to fix it. Don't you have any faith in your workers? Chojuro asked him as he, Yugo, and Jiraiya stood up as well. Very little, he answered shortly. But I don't pay them to make me have faith. I pay them to work. Jiraiya knew what he was talking about. He might be a stern boss, but he was also a fair boss. Bye, Ryoshi. I'll see you again, the Toad Sage told his old friend. Maybe next time, it won't be for business, he replied with a smile before walking away. What do we do now? Yugo asked. I think that should be quite obvious. We go find the others and tell them of what we learned. After that, we discuss options. He started walking away from the cafe after leaving a tip despite the fact they hadn't ordered. Both Yugo and Chojuro didn't hesitate, they were right behind him. Location, June. She had convinced Nyla with little trouble of waiting for them in the forest outside of the city. The trouble was making sure he got out with creating a huge problem. Now she was leaning against a wall in the marketplace, waiting for the others to arrive. "Hey baby, how about you and me go somewhere else to have some fun?" A guy said suggestively as he walked up beside her and tried to throw his arm around her. "How about you leave while your balls are still in one piece?" She suggested, pulling out a knife and placed it between his legs. The confidence he had disappeared faster than you could blink. "Get lost," she ordered, which he obeyed all too gladly. She put the knife and continued waiting, her arms folded. That was the third guy who tried to pick her up in the past 15 minutes. While she didn't mind the attention, she preferred it when she wasn't on a job. If she wasn't busy, she would flirt to her heart's content. But she was on a job, so flirting was not going to happen. They also didn't try to flirt, they went straight for the innuendos. As she waited, a trio of girls walked up to her. "Hey, loser, where did you get those clothes?" "Was it the pathetic store?" the girl in the lead said. The other two girls laughed at her supposed joke, sounding like a pair of hyenas. June didn't say anything, she kept waiting. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue?" the girl asked with a smirk, which disappeared when she realized she was being ignored. "Hey! Are you stupid or something? Don't you have anything else better to do?" June asked, finally looking over at her. "Or are you that jealous that guys are trying to get into my pants and not yours?" The girl was about to answer, but she raised her hand. "You know what? Don't bothering answering, I think I already know the answer. Now go away, I'm waiting for someone, and I don't need to talk to an idiot like you." "Excuse me," yelled the girl. Her hyenas looked shocked at the fact that someone was talking like that to their leader. "You're excused. Now scram." It looked like she was about to throw a tantrum or try and attack the bounty hunter, when Reimu appeared behind the three. "Is something the matter?" he asked with a scowl on his face, making the three cower and then scatter. It was a little amusing to watch, if they were being honest with themselves. "Thanks," June said to Reimu. They were annoying. "Why didn't you make them go away yourself?" he asked. He knew that June was a strong woman who had no trouble knocking people on their asses. She had told them many a tale of those around the fire, some of which even got him laughing, so he knew she could have handled them by herself. Come on, they weren't trying to run from me or trying to fight me. They were just a group of annoying girls who were jealous because guys kept hitting on me and not them. But you scared them off, thanks again. You're a teammate, and teammates watch each other's back. He told her with a small shrug of his shoulders. Right, and that explains how you've been trying to kill Suigetsu with a glare every time the two of you are in eyesight. She replied with a small smirk. Even though she hadn't been at the fire the first night, she had heard the commotion. The scowl on his face returned in full force. That's completely different. If you say so, it's none of my business. Good, because I've already had one of your teammates try to figure out why I hate him. He mentally growled at the memory. Let me guess, Naruto? His quiet growl was his answer. Thought so, just be glad it wasn't Sokka's sister who was doing the questioning. How could she be worse than him? He had been through a couple of therapists who tried to figure out why he hated his uncle. He had managed to infuriate them to the point where they had simply given up on him. But Naruto was the only who managed to irritate him. How could Sokka's sister be worse than him? She would grab hold of the issue and not let go of it. Trust me, I've heard all the stories. She had even heard about when Katara tried to talk to Naruto about Konoha during the time they spent on Ember Island before the comet and during the month they were in Ba Sing Se discussing the potential fifth country. From what Sokka and Azula had told her, Naruto had avoided or dodged the waterbender's questions every time she started up. Eventually, she stopped after he had told her to knock it off unless she wanted to get thrown off the outer wall without Aang around to save her. That was one of the few times Katara didn't succeed at understanding someone. By the way, where are the others? I think they're trying to pull Hozuki and Anko away from the beach. They should be in a moment, maybe a couple of minutes. He told her with frown on his face. Why aren't you there? I thought you'd be making eyes at that beach too. He glared at her. Just because I'm from Kiri, does not mean I take a look at every single good beach I come across. He retorted. So, you take a look at some good beaches. She smirked, making him more annoyed. Oh relax, don't get your panties in a wad. You know, you really should lighten up. You're reminding me of this one gloomy guy I know, except his uncle's not evil, just nuts about tea. Can we stop talking about uncles? He was being reminded of the few good memories he had of Kisame, and he didn't want to be reminded. They always led to the day he had left. That day was the one that made him what he was today. Fine, we'll stop. Look, the others are coming. She pointed down the street. Sure enough, the rest of the group was coming towards them. Anko-sensei, did you have to sick one of your snakes on that guy? Karen asked with a groan. They had been looking at the beach and enjoying the view, when Anko noticed a guy nearby looking at her with lust in his eyes. So naturally, she sent one of her snakes after him. I'm taken, Karen. You know that. Anko replied. And he didn't. He was just looking at you. He was doing more than that. He was undressing me with his eyes. She protested. Anko, every guy who doesn't know you undresses you with his eyes. You've got the body for it. Azula told her. It was true. Anko had a killer body. She was making heads as she walked by and didn't pay the slightest bit of attention to it. Both Azula and Suki were fairly certain that if she actually tried, she could even make women lust after her. They were glad she hadn't tried it on them. They liked having boyfriends. That may be, but there is only one person who can undress me, and that is my sexy Irika. She declared in a loud voice. Behind her, Naruto looked like he got an image in his head that he didn't want or need. He shuddered and tried not to think about it. You have got one crazy sensei. Suigetsu told Karen. Kami forbid she meets the Mizukage. I don't want to think about the insanity those two would cause. On that, we can agree. She replied. At that point, to any outsider they would have looked like good friends if not outright boyfriend and girlfriend. To anyone who actually knew them, they knew that while the two of them still claimed to hate each other, they were slowly working towards liking each other. It was just a matter of time. Hey look, there's June and Reimu. Sokka pointed out. The rest of the group looked over to where he was pointing and saw them as well. They walked over to them, weaving through the people on the street and staying close at the same time. Hey, everything okay? Suki asked as they got closer to June and Reimu. Yeah, pretty much. June answered nonchalantly. Reimu here just told me about how Naruto talked to him about why he hates Suigetsu. While everyone else looked at the blonde in surprise, Reimu was trying to glare the bounty hunter to death. Are you trying to channel my sister, Naruto? Sokka demanded while Akela simply rolled his eyes. No, there was no channeling of Katara. Besides, what me and Reimu talked about is between ourselves. His tone was firm and told everyone to drop the subject. They did, and Reimu gave him a brief nod of appreciation. By the way, I've been meaning to ask you something, Suigetsu. He said, changing the subject. When we first met up and you told us how you became a swordsman again, you called yourself the Kirigakure no Kijin. Didn't that title belong to Zabuza? It did and it didn't. Suigetsu told him. Zabuza did embody the title, but the wielder of the Kubikiribocho always has the title of Kirigakure no Kijin, just like the wielder of the Hiramakari always has the title of Kirigakure no Hagosha. So, each of the swordsmen have a title? Saka asked, curious about the group. Yeah, they did. The wielder of Kiba was the Kirigakure no Gakido, Rage of the Hidden Mist. The one who had Nuabari was known as the Kirigakure no Ito, Threat of the Hidden Mist. The person wielding the Kabutawari was called the Kirigakure no Kyoki, Madness of the Hidden Mist. The swordsman who had the Shibuki was the Kirigakure no Bakuhatsu, Explosion of the Hidden Mist. He told them. His voice became more and more prideful as he spoke of them. He was proud of the 7 swordsmen, even though their history wasn't exactly stellar. And I'm guessing the wielder of Samahata was the Kirigakure no Same, Shark of the Hidden Mist? Naruto asked. The question made Reimu tense up a little. Yeah, they were. The pride went out of his voice as he looked over at Reimu, who didn't make eye contact. Things fell into an awkward silence in the group. No one really knew what to say. Thankfully, a distraction came in the form of Jiraiya, Yugo, and Chojuro as they walked up to the group. Is everyone here? Jiraiya asked as he scanned the group, mentally checking off every face. Yeah, we're all here. Anko told him. Good. Let's get back to the hotel. We have a lot to discuss. As Jiraiya and his team entered their suite and closed the door, they waited for a few minutes. The others had gone to their own suites so they could avoid suspicion. They didn't know if they were being watched, but it didn't hurt to be sure. Within a few minutes, they heard knocking on the window that led to the balcony. Both Anko's team and the team from Kiri were standing on the balcony, making it a little cramped. Saka was the closest one, so he opened the balcony window to let them in. So, what did you find out? Reimu demanded of Jiraiya as they all walked into the living room and took seats on available chairs. Yugo, Chojuro, and I have probably found the person who knows where the underground auction is being held. He began. It's a local man called Nezumi. For years, he's been telling everyone who listens to him that he's a part of one of the crime families. If that's true, then there's a good chance that he's been told of what's going on. There is evidence that supports all this. Chojuro chimed in. According to Lord Jiraiya's contact, Nezumi has more quiet than usual for the past couple of days. If he has been told and was also told to keep quiet about it, that would explain his behavior. How do we get to him? Saka asked, mentally beginning to figure out a plan. It would get fleshed out as details were given to him. They're a place that he frequently visits. It's a mix between a club and brothel. Jiraiya said. You see people on stage, and if you like them, you can pay the owner and take that person to a private room. Nezumi has been a regular patron in that place for many years, and one of his visits will be in 3 days. So, one of us has to get onto that stage, put on a show that entices him, and try to have him pay to take upstairs. June summarized before looking over at the other girls in the group. Anyone want to flip for it? Actually, June, Nezumi doesn't go there for the girls. He told her. She grew confused when she heard those words. What else would he go there for? She asked. He goes there for the boys. There was stunned silence within the group as that little tidbit of information went through their heads. I'm sorry? Naruto asked as a dawning look of horror showed on his face, as well as the other boys in the group as they realized what that meant. You hurt me. That means Anko, and I've got 3 days to teach you how to seduce a guy. Chapter 56, Hell and Horror. Location, Azula and Suki. The two of them walked quietly down the street. It was almost noon, and they were in charge of getting lunch. Anko and Jiraiya had given them a list of food to get, while also pointing out the delicacies Masu had. How is Saka holding up? Azula asked Suki as they passed a store that apparently held the finest furniture in Masu. As best as he can, she replied as her eyes skimmed over the store. For the past 2 nights, he's come to bed and just held me in his arms, whispering that he was so glad to have me as a girlfriend. Naruto's been doing the same thing, she admitted. I know this might sound a little selfish, but I'm glad I'm not the one who's getting a crash course in seducing a guy. As far as she could tell, the last 2 days have been hell for the male members of the group, minus Jiraiya. Apparently, the Toad Sage was a fucking sadist even when it came to seduction, and they were learning everything they could in the space of 2 days. I don't blame you, Suki assured her. If the target preferred girls over guys, they would be the ones getting the crash course. June would probably have been okay, but they weren't so sure about the rest of them. So, they were a little glad that the guys were getting the short end of the stick now. Do you think they'll be okay tonight? She hadn't really seduced anyone before. She had either flaunted her power or showed it off subtly to get people on her side, but that was about it, and she didn't count Naruto, due to the fact they had been together in one way or another for the past 3 years. But she didn't know if the guys didn't really have any seducing skills. At least she knew Sokka and Naruto didn't. Until last winter, Sokka had chauvinistic ideas about women and Naruto still believed that he wasn't anything special in the looks department. I honestly don't know. We'll have to find out ourselves. That is, if Jiraiya lets us go, she commented as they walked past a large group of people who walked right down the middle of the street. Are you planning to go so you can watch them suffer? Azula asked the Kyoshi warrior. She knew that Anko, June, and Karen would try and go just to get a kick out of it. They enjoyed watching stuff that made a guy squirm, June and Anko more than Karen. Maybe a little, she admitted. It was a little entertaining to watch the confident Sokka do something that he was absolutely horrified of, and this was probably one of the things he was most horrified of. But I'm also hoping that if Sokka sees me, he'll feel a little more confident about himself during the mission. Kinda silently cheering him on, you know? I can see where you're coming. It was a good idea to show silent support to their boyfriends. Who knows what they would have to do tonight? A thought then crossed her mind that made her smirk. I just realized something, she said as they walked into the hotel. If Zuko had come with us, he would have to do the same thing. That would be entertaining. I think Katara would have felt the same way about her brother if she had come as well, Suki remarked as they made their way over to the elevator. A look of slight disgust came onto her face as she realized something. You know, if everyone had come, then Aang would have to do the same thing as well. They both shuddered at the thought as they entered the elevator. Despite him being the Avatar, nobody really wanted to see him do stuff like that, and for 2 reasons. The first was because they were fairly certain that he wouldn't be able to pull it off. The second one was because they still weren't sure if he had hit puberty yet, though his lesson with Jiraiya helped a little. They rode up the elevator in silence, not wanting to continue that conversation in front of the operator. When he reached their floor, they stepped off and walked to the suite door. Suki thumped on the door 3 times. Food's up, she shouted through it. It's about time, June said as she opened the door. Did you decide to take a swim while you were out? Hello to you too, June, Azula replied, walking past her and into the room. Have the guys finished up yet? Go out to the balcony and waft the smell of the food up, that'll get their attention, the bounty hunter told her before walking away. Both the Kyoshi warrior and the former Fire Nation princess shared a look with each other. I'll get their attention if you set up the food, Azula offered. Okay. They split up. Suki went to the kitchen and Azula made her way over to the balcony door. She passed Karen, who was reading something. She didn't pay close enough attention to it to find out what it was, and walked out onto the balcony. Holding the carton of food up, she bent the heat of the spices on the food up to the balcony above. It took a couple of minutes, but it got their attention. Is that food I smell? Jiraiya asked from above her. She couldn't see him. She could only hear his voice, and that was distinctive enough for her. Yes, it is. If you aren't down in 5 minutes, we'll start without you. She answered before turning around and walking back into the suite. She joined Suki in the kitchen and helped finish setting up the food. Within 5 minutes, everyone had arrived for the food. There was no gathering at the table, they just found a comfy spot in the general spot in the area and ate there. For a good 10 to 15 minutes, the only sounds in the suite was those of eating and someone asking someone to pass them something, or if they could try that food. It would have looked very picturesque if someone had taken a picture at that point. So, how are things coming? June asked Naruto. Do you think that you'll be ready for tonight? The blonde glared at her. If we're not ready, I will gladly kill myself. He said simply. He probably had every single seduction technique that dealt with guys crammed into his head, whether he liked it or not, although there were a few that worked on girls too, which some of the guys filed away for later use. Please don't. I rather like you living. Azula told him. Same here, the QB told him, albeit with a big grin on his face. For the past 2 days, the fox had either been laughing his furry rear off or doing a running commentary as they practiced the techniques. Needless to say, the blonde hated the Biju for the past 2 days and wished for him to die in several horrific ways. You can't kill yourself, Gaki. Jiraiya told him bluntly. You're going to be the main attraction if the others don't get Nezumi's attention. The guys had actually been given roles to play for tonight. Sokka was to be the sarcastic cynic, who has supposedly been in the business the longest. Chojuro was going to be playing the role the others had taken to calling the virgin shy, quiet, and very nervous when it came to the bedroom. Suigetsu was the bad boy while Reimo was the dominator, both were not supposed to be gentle. Don't remind me. He replied in a half-growl. Naruto had the role that was most likely to get their target's attention. It was known as the Mysterious Beauty. He was supposed to be on the run from a noble who he was supposed to serve, and had the aura of someone who wanted to be saved, while also being mysterious and hauntingly beautiful. Naturally, the very idea horrified him because, according to Jiraiya, that was probably the most likely to Nezumi's attention. Get over it, Naruto. We need to find out where the underground auction is, and doing this is our best bet. The Toad Sage reminded him. That's easy for you to say, you're not doing this. Your entire part in this was spreading the story around. During the first day of their lessons, Jiraiya had visited Ryoshi again, and started a conversation about the mysterious beauty and the fake backstory he had, right in front of Ryoshi's workers. Within the space of a few hours, about half of Masu knew the story, while some had claimed to know the guy personally. But it was generally agreed on that he now worked at the same place Nezumi usually goes to. Naruto, relax. You're not the only one in this, remember? Sokka said to the blonde. Even Yugo was still a part of the training. He had just been regulated to the post of kissing dummy. Jiraiya had stated that he was a bit wooden when it came to the seducing, so he wouldn't be convincing. Plus, with all the people looking at him and possibly talking about him, there was a chance that he would go berserk, and they didn't need that. It could be worse. Suki pointed out. Aang could have been doing the same thing if he had come. While most of the people there had no idea who Aang was, or at the very least, had a vague idea, the ones who did felt slightly disturbed at the thought and image. Naruto, who had just swallowed of his food, fought the urge to spit it back up when he imagined the airbender doing what they've been trying to do. Suki, I'm trying to eat here. He shouted at the Kyoshi warrior. I didn't that any more than I need to hear about Anko and Irika-sensei. That reminds me, I haven't told you about the time Irika walked in on me when I was in the shower and I let him join me. Anko said to him with a cheerful sadistic grin. He looked like he wanted to kill himself at that point. Anko, please stop tormenting him. Jiraiya told her. But in all seriousness, Suki, please don't ever mention that again. The only person right now who is interested in seeing him the way he came into this world is my sister. Sokka reminded his girlfriend. By the time they had left the bending countries, Aang and Katara were so much in love it was almost sickening to watch them in public. Of course, only Toph publicly made gagging noise, mostly because she was the only single person left in the group. Aren't you worried about this Aang guy doing something to your sister? Chojuro asked. He knew if he had a sister, he'd be watching any boyfriend she had like a hawk, and keep his sword in view at all times. That question made everyone who knew Aang laugh out loud. Are you kidding? Azula asked. The kid doesn't even know the meaning of the phrase taking the initiative. The only way he would get lucky if Katara stripped naked in front of him, and took it from there. Sokka made a gagging noise at those words. That's my sister, Azula. He shouted at her. She's still right, Sokka. Naruto told him. I mean, he didn't even know what rape was until Jiraiya educated him. He smiled at the memory. It had given him a deep satisfaction listening to Aang practically begging the Toad Sage to stop his lesson. Okay, fun is over. Jiraiya declared, placing his empty plate on the nearby table. It's time for the final review. Every guy in the room groaned. They were hoping to get a few more minutes of peace and relaxation before going back to the torture. Stop whining, this is for the mission, and you all know it. He told them sternly. We know that. We just don't like it. Suigetsu replied. I hear that. Reimu agreed. In the past 2 days, his hatred for Suigetsu had been put to the side, as they now shared a common hatred Jiraiya. This had led to them backing each other up whenever he criticizes and or insult one of them. Chojuro hoped that it would be enough for them to actually have a friendship, but he wasn't placing all of his money on it. I don't care. Now get moving. Jiraiya barked. They grumbled but they went out to the balcony and climbed back up to the suite above. That left the girls to clean the plates they had been using and to throw away the rest of the food, which wasn't very much. How much longer do they have until they head over to the club? Karen asked. Tonight, what had been forced into their heads would be put to the test. And they needed to succeed. This was probably going to be their only chance to get information on the underground auction and what is being auctioned off. Probably an hour or two. Answered Anko. She had helped Jiraiya train the guys on some points, after Yugo had made her promise not to use any of her snakes, so she kinda knew how they were doing. If you're worried about your boyfriend, he'll be fine. Suigetsu is not my boyfriend. She yelled at her sensei, her face flustered. I didn't say anything about Suigetsu. She replied with a smirk. She couldn't say anything in response. Arg. She suddenly screamed, walking away from the room. You really enjoy doing that to her. June noted. She wasn't accusing the snake mistress. She was just stating the fact. Of course, I do, it's really entertaining. She's so stiff sometimes I have to tease her so she can loosen up. It's almost hard to believe she's related to Naruto. That statement made everyone else in the room stop what they were doing and look at her. She's what? Azula demanded, almost shouting. What? You never knew? She asked, actually surprised. Her full name is Karen Uzumaki. She's Naruto's cousin. They were actually surprised by that. Due to the fact that Naruto didn't really talk about his past, and that his parents died, they had more or less assumed that he didn't have any family left. Does she know? Suki asked. Of course, she does. We discovered their relationship after we released her and Yugo from jail, and enlisted them in the Konoha Shinobi forces. We were surprised too when she told us. No one was quite sure how many jaws had been dropped when the redhead told them that, although there was a tie between Jiraiya and Tsunade and how long their jaw had been dropped. Does Naruto know? Azula shook her head. No, I don't think he does. It would be something he would be surprised about, that was for sure. Well, if he doesn't, it's none of our business. Let him find out on his own. June stated with a shrug of her shoulders. When it came to family things that didn't involve her, she stayed out of them. Both Suki and Azula wordlessly agreed with her. Location: Nezumi. Night had fallen as Nezumi walked through the streets to the club. His hands were shaking slightly. He wasn't nervous, he was excited. He was always excited when he went to the club. There, if he paid enough, he could have any boy he wanted. Nobody publicly said that his sexual preferences were disgusting, mostly because he wouldn't hesitate to point who exactly had been lying when it came to their sex life, married or not. It was true that Nezumi preferred boys. It had started when he was a teenager. He had seen a younger boy pass by in the street and was filled with a hunger for him. That hunger was satisfied about 2 weeks later when he dragged the boy into a back alley and raped him. The boy had later committed suicide, but Nezumi didn't care. He had discovered his taste in carnal pleasures and he wasn't one to let that go to waste. Since then, he had experimented with his sexual preferences to see how far they went. He discovered that he mostly preferred them to be in their teens or early 20s, but he wasn't closed to the idea of sleeping with older men. While he could seduce any of them, he wasn't a very patient man and those took time. So, he went to the club and got his kicks there. He got a show before taking his pick for the night. He couldn't see anything wrong with that. If people had to describe Nezumi, they would say that he was a living definition of his name. He was a bit short and his face was slightly pinched, making his eyes bulged out somewhat. His dark hair was thinning and his nose looked like it could poke someone's eye if he wanted to that. Because he claimed that he had ties to one of the crime families, he always clothes that looked to be at the very least semi-fashionable. Despite what he wore, they always seemed a little ratty and always had one stain somewhere on it. He always looked like he got the clothes second-handed, like one of his crime family friends gave him their old clothes when they didn't want them anymore. Personally, he didn't care what they looked like. It showed that he had connections. As he walked up to the entrance of the club, he stopped to look at it. Despite of what was inside it, the front of the club was actually quite modest. The sign above the door was of medium size and had no flashing lights surrounding it or silhouettes of girls on poles around it. The building itself was only 3 stories, barely standing out from the other buildings surrounding it. If you weren't looking for it, you would have walked right past it. He walked through the front door, closing it behind him as he entered. "Good evening, sir." The receptionist greeted him. He didn't know this one, so he just acknowledged her with a nod of his head and walked past her. After walking through a small corridor, he entered the showroom of the club. At one end of the room, the stage and poles were found. The poles were currently empty, due to the fact that they were in between shows at the moment, just the way Nezumi had intended. Had he arrived earlier, he would have been watching the girls perform, and he wasn't there for them. He found himself an empty couch and sat down. "Would you like something to drink, sir?" Someone right beside him asked, sounding a little nervous. He turned his head to see who was talking. It turned out to be a blue-haired kid with black glasses. He held himself nervously, like he wasn't sure what to do, or if he was going to be selected for a night. In the club, the entertainers were also sometimes the waiter. If you weren't on stage or upstairs, you were working the floor, taking orders, and serving them. If Nezumi had to guess, it was most likely that he was a virgin. If you were a regular customer at the club and you knew what to look for, you could tell if someone was a virgin or not. "Just get me some sake," he told the kid. "Right away, sir." He bowed his head and quickly scampered off. "How've you been, Nezumi?" the owner asked him as she walked up to him. Even though he had been coming to the club regularly for years, he was not on a first-name basis with the owner. If he thought about it, no one actually knew her name. She was just known as the owner or ma'am. The basic rule about the club was if you hurt her people, she would hurt you worse. "I've been fine," he answered. Are there any new features I should know of? I've gotten a couple of new guys. You've already met one of them. She pointed at the kid, who was getting the sake from the bar. Apparently, he's a virgin. Thought so, he thought triumphantly. Is there anyone else? Well, I've got an old pro, a dominator, a bad boy, and the apparent talk of the town. She said with a small smirk. Have you heard about him? Yeah, I've heard of him. He had heard the stories about the mysterious stranger who had come to town. From what he heard, the stranger was either on the run from a noble because he didn't want to be his lover, or he was hiding from an obsessed stalker who decided that if he couldn't have him, no one could. Tonight's his first night. I watched his audition. He's quite good if you're interested. I'll judge him for myself, thanks. He liked to choose for himself and hated it when someone tried suggesting someone for him. He alone would decide if the person was worth the talk. Very well, he should be starting up soon. Enjoy your evening. She walked away, leaving him alone. He sat in silence, even as the kid came back with his sake. Here you are, sir. He said, carefully placing the cup and the bottle down in front of him. Will there be anything else? No. The kid bowed his head and began to walk away. Wait. He stopped and turned back to face him. You came here with the one everyone's talking about, right? Nozomi asked him. Yes sir. He answered. I don't know much about him, however. We only met up while on the road and he usually kept to himself. He would have kept talking if Nozomi hadn't held up a hand, silently ordering him to stop. I asked if you came here with him, I didn't ask you for details. He told the kid. Now beat it. The kid scurried away, leaving him alone with the sake. Chojuro quickly walked away from the target and made his way to backstage. He kept his appearance as a nervous virgin until he arrived at the room they were given. Due to the fact that they were to the club and had auditioned together, they had been given their own room until they were more used to the place. He walked in and closed to the door behind him. He's here, he declared to the others. The others all turned their attention to him. Are you sure about that? Saka asked. He wore a set of nondescriptive clothes and looked older than he actually was, courtesy of well-placed shinobi makeup, which lasts longer than ordinary makeup. Considering I just gave him sake, yes I am. He replied, slightly sarcastic. Reimu chuckled slightly as he fiddled with a kunai. It was the same kunai he had pulled out the first night the three teams had camped together. He always played with it whenever he felt on edge about something, or was simply nervous. To anyone else, it would have been a simple kunai. To him, it was the kunai his father gave to him when he became a student at the academy, and the only thing to remember him by. Did he say anything to you? He asked. He wore a robe and if he were to take it off, it would show that he was wearing skin-tight black leather with a riding crop and whip attached to the belt. Just that he wanted sake. He also wanted to know if I came into town with Roto. He gestured over to Naruto, who was sitting against a sofa. He wore the bare minimum stage makeup, which covered his whisker marks, and wore clothes that looked to be easily taken off. But that's all he wanted. Sounds like he's a man who forms his own opinion about something, Saka remarked. Looks like you'll have to work extra hard to get his attention if we fail to get it, Naruto. He told his fellow Paragon. Saka, I'm already planning to kill FS-sensei for making me do this. The blonde growled. You keep this up, and I'll kill you too. He held his hands up in a surrendering gesture. Sorry. Hey, Uzumaki, remember you're not the only one who has to do this. Suigetsu told him, wearing a costume that looked like it was based on baggy clothes. The only one who got to do that is Yugo, and we all know why that is. Someone pounded on the door, surprising them. Hey, guy with the weird name. You're on in 5. that person shouted through the door. Sokka rolled his eyes. All right, I'm coming. He shouted back. Well, wish me luck, guys. He stood up from he sat. We'll wish that you don't make an ass of yourself out there and blow our cover. Naruto told him with slight smile. It was enough to make the others to relax enough to not worry about the mission for the moment. It was also a rather good stroke of luck that Jiraiya knew the owner of the place. Apparently, they went way back. That's a point to you. He conceded. But that's a good wish too. He walked out of the room, closing the door behind him. Well, there goes the second best pole dancer among us. Suigetsu remarked. Please don't remind me of the fact that those two actually ranked us on things. Naruto told him with a small shudder. He still couldn't believe that Jiraiya and Anko had done something like that to them. In his personal opinion, he didn't really need to know that he had the third best strut of the five of them. This is coming from the best pole dancer among us? He asked in return with a small smirk. How many times do I have to tell you guys? I was 7 and I was bored. It looked like fun when the girls were doing it. He explained with a scowl on his face. He also couldn't believe that Jiraiya had told them that time he spent at the meat bar. You keep saying that. We might believe you one day. Reimu replied as he put the kunai in his hands away. The blonde growled at the two of them, but he didn't do anything. They had to stay focused on the mission. The dance number was done and the man on stage walked off. Nezumi watched as he came down the stairs. He was an older fellow with a few gray hairs on his head, which he tried to keep out of sight by brushing his hair over them. Even though he walked with a sway in his hips, it didn't reach his eyes. He looked like he had done it enough times to stop caring. Without a word, he came over and sat down in the divan next to Nezumi. Go away. Nezumi ordered him. What? A guy can't sit down and get a drink? He asked, taking the sake bottle and taking a swig out of it. Not where he is not wanted. Kami, just give me a minute. He stretched his back, trying to get the kinks out of his back. He had also left his shirt open on purpose and showed off the muscles he had. While Nezumi was willingly to admit he had some nice ones, he still wasn't interested. Ah, that's better. The man said with a relaxed sigh. Anyway, my name's Han. He introduced himself. I didn't ask for your name nor do I care about it. Nezumi snapped at him. Yeah, I'd figured you'd say that. Relax. I'm not here to seduce you. He told him in a bored tone. I'm just here to sit down for a few minutes. I'm sure you have a room backstage for that. I got saddled with the newbies, so I figure I relax down here. He signaled the kid to bring him a cup. The kid nodded and quickly walked over to the bar. He got the cup and swiftly brought it over to them, placing the cup on the table, and then walking away. I would have thought you were a newbie too, considering you're sharing a room with the rest of them. He snorted. Just because I'm stuck with newbies doesn't make me one. This isn't the first place I've shaken my ass for people. He poured the sake into the cup and drank it all in one gulp. He shuddered slightly as the drink raced down his throat. Sometimes I wonder if I went into the wrong profession. I take it you're the old pro the owner got? Nezumi asked as he poured himself another drink from the sake bottle and drained the cup. How did you know? He asked sarcastically in return. The lights dimmed down and amidst the hoots and catcalls, another boy came out onto the stages. He walked with a slouch and held a mock scowl on his face. And here's the new bad boy. He announced. If you're going to give me a running commentary on each person who comes onto the stage, piss off. I don't need it. That's fine by me. He got up from the divan and walked away. Nezumi briefly watched him walk over to a group of 4 girls and a boy. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw another boy dressed in a skin-tight black leather suit talking aggressively to a woman wearing a trench coat and a white-haired man. Must be a dominator, he thought to himself before turning his attention back to the stage. The bad boy was still going on stage. Apparently, he was doing quite well, if the whistles and shouts were anything to go by. Personally, he didn't think much of bad boys. In the bed, they were the same as any other boy he had done. After a few more minutes, the bad boy was done. He walked off in spite of the applause he got. He snorted and reached for the sake bottle. "Can I pour that for you?" A quiet, husky voice asked from behind him. He turned around and looked upon a dream. He was taller than Nezumi, most people were. He had blonde hair that looked untamed, casting shadows over his eyes in the shifting lights. He wore clothes that seemed to be too tight, in his opinion at least, which highlighted the muscles he had. But the thing that had his attention was his eyes. They looked like two pools from the ocean, with the shadows making it look like they had hidden depths. Yes, you can," he told him as he walked around the couch, suddenly a bit nervous. You can have some yourself if you want some." "Thank you." The blonde took the sake bottle and poured drinks into the cups. He placed the bottle down and took one of the cups. "To you," he said, raising his cup in a salute before placing to his lips, and drank. Nezumi could only watch in fascination as he drank. While that Han had poured the sake down his throat in one big gulp, this man seemed content to drink slowly and torment him by making him watch his throat move with each gulp. The only thing that he could think at that point was that the person in front of him was perfection carved into human form. "My name is Nezumi," he introduced himself. He didn't know why, but he felt like a teenager in front of a crush. "It's a pleasure. My name is Ruto." The blonde greeted him as he sat down on the divan. While Han had just sat on the divan, he lounged on it, spreading his entire body out to sea. When he saw this, Nezumi's breath hitched and his nether regions began to stir. "What is wrong with me?" He briefly wondered before he couldn't help but focus back on the beauty lying before him. "Are the stories about you true?" he blurted out before he could stop himself. Instead of being offended or angry, the blonde only mysteriously smiled. "I wasn't aware there were stories about me," he replied. "I am no one special." He couldn't believe those words. He couldn't be more wrong. He thought to himself. The very fact he considered himself to be no one special was something to be considered blasphemous. He was fairly certain that if the man in front of him had been born female, men would go to war over her. "I have heard that you ran away from a noble, or an obsessed stalker." "Ah yes, you mean those stories." The smile faded from his face as a small look of pain crossed it. "They're both true and yet false." "What do you mean?" He looked at him with a question in his eyes. "Why do you care?" he asked quietly. "I just want to know the truth. To see if I can find the person in the mystery everyone keeps talking about." He wanted to be the one to solve the mystery, to have the person inside of it. The question disappeared from his eyes as he laughed. It was a rich, sensual laugh that shivers down to his bones, and made his regions stir even more. "Perhaps I may tell you," Ruto said to him, standing up from the divan and slowly walking over to him. He stood in front of the couch, and leaned down so he was almost face to face with him. "If you really want to know, that is." "I do. I really want to know." He wanted to know so badly, it almost hurt. The blonde slowly leaned forward. It almost looked like he was about to kiss the man in front of him, but instead he leaned into his ear. "Then maybe I'll tell you, if you want me enough," he whispered. He leaned back up and walked away. Nezumi could stare at him as he walked backstage. "Well, what do you think?" the owner asked as she stood behind him. "He is, something," he admitted. He wanted to say more, but he had to look like he hadn't fallen so easily. He had a bit of a reputation to protect, even if it wasn't a good reputation. Oh, don't worry. He had that same effect on everyone he met when he came into the audition. She told him with a smirk. So, do you want him? I can have him ready in a room within minutes. And no, I'll watch him for a bit longer. Very well, but you might not want much longer. I'm fairly certain that as the night goes on, more and more people will want him. Who knows? One of them will be brave enough to ask for him. He fought down a surge of anger and jealousy. I'll wait until after he dances, he said with a forced calm voice. He couldn't show that he already wanted the blonde. If he did, the owner wouldn't hear his price until she heard the other prices. Very well, fine by me. He poured himself more sake and drank it. The owner smirked to herself and walked away. Naruto kept his slow walk back till he got backstage and entered the room. Once inside, he saw Sokka sitting at mirror. You give him the pill, right? He asked, sitting down in one of the chairs. Sokka nodded as he turned to face the blonde. Put it in the bottle after I poured a drink for myself. He shuddered slightly. Don't drink sake in a gulp, he advised. Duly noted, he replied. So, he's taken with you? That was the important question. They were placing most of their bets on that pill. Flashback. Anko had stepped out, leaving the seducers in training with Jiraiya. The Toad Sage stood over them like a master over his servants as they all sat on the floor. Do you guys want my honest opinion on your seduction abilities? He asked them. We crave it, Naruto said with tired sarcasm. The others agreed, glaring up at him. You all would probably be able to pull this off, if we had a few more weeks. In case you haven't noticed, FS-sensei, we barely have a day, Sokka told him. His back felt like it was filled with knots after he had been on the pole and spun the wrong way. He was having murderous thoughts about the man in front of him. He would have had murderous thoughts about Anko, but she wasn't in the room at the moment. I know that, Sokka. And I know a way to help you lot out. Their attention perked up when they heard him say that. How can you help us? Chojuro asked. He, as well as the others, wanted to make this training easier, or go faster in any way they could. He smirked and pulled a small pill from one of his pockets. With this, he told them triumphantly. They all stared at it with some disbelief. It's a pill, Reimu told him. How in the name of Kami is a pill going to help us? This isn't just any pill. This is a love addiction pill. This was one of the few good things Orochimaru ever created, he announced, ignoring the scowl that appeared on Naruto's face. Even though the man was dead, the blonde still hated him. And how exactly does this help us? Sokka asked, looking the pill over from where he sat on the ground. It wasn't a big pill, but neither was it small. It was cubed in shape and was also red in color. If someone was to add their chakra to this pill and then feed it to someone, that someone would become hopelessly in love with them, he explained. So, if Naruto was to add his chakra to this pill and give it to Nezumi. He trailed off as Naruto slowly had an expression of horror come onto his face. He would become hopelessly in love with him. Suigetsu finished with an almost sadistic grin. Oh no way in hell or for the love of Kami am I doing that. Naruto protested immediately. It was bad enough that he had to learn this kind of stuff, but he didn't want to be the one who led the charge in this part of the mission. Face it, Naruto. You're the best one for the job, Sokka told him. It bothered him a little, but out of all the males of Team Avatar and Team Paragon, the blonde was the best looking. Besides, you're already the mysterious beauty, Reimu pointed out, earning a glare from the blonde in the process. You make it sound like I volunteered for the spot. He growled. That's enough, Naruto. Jiraiya told him. Nezumi likes boys and he never could resist a mystery. To him, you're the ideal package and this will help you get him easier. He scowled, but understood the advantages of the pill. He might not like it, but he would still do it. Alright, fine. Give it here. He told the Toad Sage, holding out a slightly shaky hand. The pill was dropped into his hand and he concentrated. A small amount of his chakra latched onto the pill. For a mere second, it was covered in blue fire. Then the chakra faded away and the color of the pill was now purple. There, it's primed. He said as he tossed it back at Jiraiya, who caught it with ease. Good. Now since I'm doing you guys a favor, you'll have to do one for me. The Toad Sage told them. And what would we have to do? Chojuro asked him. They had to be careful when it came to favors with him, because odds are they involved a lot of angry women. You'll just have to help me prove an urban legend true. Would this be the same urban legend you and Ryoshi were talking about? He asked with suspicion. Yeah, talking about it reignited the urge to see that it was true. And now, I have help. He smiled evilly at them. That is, unless you don't want this. He held the pill out for them to see. Alright fine, we'll help you with your legend thing. Naruto told him, desperate to have that pill. Good, is there anything else? Just one thing, why the hell would that bastard of a snake create such a pill? The fact that Orochimaru did create that pill wasn't computing inside the blonde's head. End flashback. Oh yeah, he's taken with me. Naruto confirmed. He hasn't asked for me yet. But he's taken with me. It felt a little nauseating to say that about a guy. Why hasn't he asked for you? Sokka asked him. I would have thought he'd do that the moment he laid eyes on you. Either it takes a while for it to fully take effect, or he is very stubborn. Either way, it just means more work for me. And a pole dance. He shuddered. Don't remind me. Just be sure to put on a good show. The tribesman said with a big grin. When it came to making the blonde squirm and be unnerved about things, which were very few, he took great pleasure in tormenting him. Sokka, I'm about to kill you. Hold still. Every moment Nezumi didn't see the blonde was agonizing. Both the bad boy and the dominator had come over and tried to seduce him, but he didn't want them. He wanted Roto and the mystery he carried with him. He all but ordered them to leave him alone. When the lights dimmed down and Roto stepped out, everyone fell silent. There were no catcalls and no hoots as he walked to the pole, a mysterious smile on his face that dared people to try and figure him out. When he reached and took hold of the pole, the music started. Nezumi couldn't tell what kind of music was being played because, quite frankly, he didn't care. The dancing of the blonde completely enraptured him. Every move he made seemed to be poetry in motion. When he slowly and sensually took off the shirt, Nezumi had a small part of his brain ordering him to get up onto the stage, rip the blonde off the pole, throw him down to the ground, and take him right then and there. When the blonde's hands teasingly played with the collar of his pants, many people in the crowd were praying to Kami for him to take it off. But he only gave them a naughty smile and pulled his hands away, making them silently groan. Kami above, he's beautiful. Nezumi thought to himself as the music finally ended and Roto sauntered off the stage, throwing the crowd one last teasing glance before disappearing behind the curtain. I take it you want him now? The owner asked him as she walked over to him. Yes I do. He said breathlessly. Alright, go up to your usual room and I'll send him up soon. We will discuss price afterwards. She walked away towards backstage. He got up from the couch and made his way towards the stairs. He climbed them until he got to the third floor and entered the door on the left. It was a room that only had a bed. It wasn't a room for romance, it was for sex, and that was it. He quietly sat down on the side of the bed and waited. He didn't wait long. Within 5 minutes, which felt longer to him, the blonde stepped through the door. "I'm here," he announced. "I guess you really wanted to know my story." "Of course I do." He stood up from the bed and approached the blonde. "You couldn't think that I would simply leave you alone after you left hanging like that? Perhaps I was curious on how far you would go for me. To see if you actually wanted me. Oh, I want you more than you could ever know." He reached up and pulled the blonde into a kiss. It was a rough, harsh kiss. His hands trailed down behind the blonde's back and gripped his rear tightly, making Naruto hiss, and allowing him to thrust his tongue into the blonde's mouth. "Tell me your story," he said after he finished the kiss. "I will, if you will tell me something first," Naruto said in reply. "What do you know?" Before he knew what had happened, he was shoved up against the wall, and had a kunai lightly resting against his crouch. "I want the location of the underground auction," the blonde told him, his voice becoming harsher and more terrifying. In an instant, the mysterious man who had teased him was gone, and in his place was a man who was willingly to kill him. "That is unless you wish to lose what makes you a man." He pressed the kunai a little harder, emphasizing his point. "What? Who are you?" he asked, snapping clear of the lust-filled haze that had engulfed him. His voice had become higher-pitched, if that was possible, both due out of fear for his life and his balls. "That is none of your concern. I want to know everything about the underground auction, its location, the people who will be there, and what's in the catalog. You have 5 seconds to start talking before I slowly make you a eunuch." 5, 4. It was at that point Nezumi spilled the beans. He told Naruto everything about the underground auction that he had been told. As he listened, the blonde's eyes only showed emotion at point, and it was brief. He wasn't quite sure what he had heard. He was speaking too rapidly to remember everything he said. "And that's all I know. I swear," Nezumi finished. He was now actually terrified for his life. He had realized that since he had given everything he knew about the underground auction, his life was now forfeit. "Are you going to kill me?" "No, I won't kill you." Before he could even speak, he felt the pain of a needle entering his neck. "I'm just going to make you forget this night ever happened." He lost strength in his legs and collapsed to the ground. His eyesight began to grow blacker as he watched the legs of the blonde, which were amazing in his honest, non-hazed opinion, stroll out of the room. The last thing he heard before succumbing to unconsciousness was the blonde saying now for a very cold shower, and to never speak of this night again. Location: Coastal Hotel. The minute that Naruto had gone upstairs was the same minute that everyone else began to leave the club. Each one made left at their own pace. Those who had been working left through the back door that led into the alley. They didn't need to worry about people wondering about where they had gone. Jiraiya had already paid the owner to tell everyone that they had left after only one night because they didn't like it there. When they got to the hotel, they pretended to go to their own suites. Akela had lifted his head once from the couch to make sure it was actually Sokka and his teammates who entered the suite, then went back to sleep. But once they were inside, both Anko's team and the Kiri team entered Team Paragon's suite via the balcony. "I gotta say, boys, that was an impressive show tonight," Anko said with a grin. "Please don't remind us." Chojuro all but begged her. "I've lost count of how many times someone felt up but as I walked by. You weren't the one who had to be on stage 3 times in a row." Suigetsu told him. "I had to do that, Suigetsu. Remember?" Sokka asked him rhetorically. He gave a tired sigh and continued. "Look, I think we can all agree to never speak of this night again. I'll drink to that," Naruto said as he walked through the door, getting everyone's attention. "Well, you boys might try to forget about tonight, but we're not going to," Karen said with a smirk that seemed triumphant. "I figured you'd say that." While he said those words, he knew that might not be the case. If Jiraiya's plan actually succeeded, the boys would have enough blackmail material to keep the girls quiet about tonight. Now, if you all don't mind, I'm going to get out of these ridiculous clothes and go drown myself in freezing cold water after throwing up in the toilet. He started to walk in the direction of the bathroom. Naruto, wait. Yugo called out, making the blonde stop. Did you get anything out of Nezumi? I did, but I was hoping it would wait until I'd purged myself of tonight's memories. But I guess it's best to get it all out now. He turned to face them all, the expression on his face. Okay, I've got 2 pieces of good news and a very big piece of bad news. Which would you all like to hear first? The good news, Jiraiya told him. To him, it was always better to hear the good news before the bad news. That way, you had something to cheer you after hearing the bad news. Alright, the good news is that I've managed to get the location of the underground auction out of Nezumi as well as confirm the fact that the 4 lost swords of the swordsman will be there. The faces of the 3 Kiri shinobi lit up when they heard that news. If he had told them that the swords were not going to be there, odds are they would have left right then and there. But they weren't, they were sticking around to get them back. And what's the bad news? Sokka asked him, preparing for the worst. He looked at them all for a quiet moment. The bad news is that Kakuzu isn't the only Akatsuki member that's coming to the underground auction this year. He finally told them. Kisame is with him too. Everyone in the room fell silent when they heard that piece of bad news. And yet no one had missed the fact that one of them thought that Naruto had given them not bad news, but very good news. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfictions. Looking forward to having you on board again.